Thanks a million, Frank. Cheers. I might just quickly share, yeah, as Frank mentioned, I'm Alex, by the way. We'll get to our introductions in a sec. I'm just going to share my screen, if that's possible, because we've got our own little presentation. I don't know if we maybe want to do introductions now, Paul. If you want to go and introduce yourself. While
if you want to work away on that, and I'll introduce myself. So, hi everyone. As Frank said, I'm Paul from Cork. You would have picked up on the accent immediately. Hope no one is offended in the first instance, but I've been in Google coming up on 2 years now. So I work across the UK market, and I'm an account strategist, let's say. So basically working with a lot of clients that spend quite a large amount online and trying to kind of make sure that they spend it in, like, let's say, a responsible way that helps funnel their growth and basically kind of growing with your clients. So working with them on a daily basis. So that's the kind of the overview of my role in terms of myself. Again, from Cork, huge interest in rugby. Not the brightest years over the last few years, but I'm sure Alex will cap on that as well, and Frank has also been saying it to me, but massive part of my life as well, but it's something that I bring into my everyday, certainly. So I'll switch over to Alex now as well.
Awesome, thanks, Paul. Can I check, can you see the screen, Paul? You can, or are you able to see the presentation?
Yeah, I can see the screen, yeah.
Oh, great. Yeah, so my name's Alex. Thanks, Paul. First and foremost, I'm a Leinster man, as Paul mentioned, which I love to remind of, as does Frank every now and then. So I'm from Dublin, and really similar role to Paul, where Paul would work in the UK market. I actually work in the Irish market. So I've been in Google just about 2 years, and yeah, mainly working with small and medium-sized businesses across Ireland, just trying to help them grow. So Paul and I have both been working from home since about February, which is great because I don't have to see him in the office every day. It's giving me a break from his terrible chat around the water cooler. But hopefully we'll be back to normality soon enough. So for today, we've got a couple of things we're going to chat about. So we'll go straight past the introduction since we just had that. So there's kind of two elements to what we'll be chatting about today. We're going to talk a bit about Google and kind of the work that Paul and I would do, and also just in general what kind of Google does in as a kind of business and the products they have. We're going to talk a little about Google search, which is where most of the work Paul and I would do is, and some kind of trends, some trends specific to coronavirus and COVID-19 and how we would use that in our kind of our jobs, and then also just a bit on online safety as well, and kind of just general things about navigating the internet. So that's ourselves. As you can tell, I'm obviously the much more photogenic of the two of us, and yeah, Paul's in the UK and myself in Ireland. So I'm just going to start with just a tiny little bit about the products that we have. So Paul's going to go into them, but I think maybe to start just a bit about Google in general. If I had €1 for every time someone asked me what it is that I did for Google, I'd have a lot of money. I've had €1 for every time that I failed to explain what I did, I'd have even more. So I think it's a bit of a black box, especially when it's such a presence in Ireland of, you know, what exactly is it that Google does. And there's a lot of products, but the main one, and the one that I might just show a little bit of a clip about here, is Google search. So you're all obviously aware of Googling. That's where most of our work would be done, and it's pretty international. So I'm going to try play this clip. Oh, it mightn't be here. Yeah. So I might just test it first, and then let me know if you're able to hear the audio, Frank. 1 second. And if not, I might have to clip out of it. Can you hear audio yet?
No audio yet.
No.
Give me 2 seconds. I think that was the setting when I started. Just give me 2 seconds, guys. If not, I mean, it's no huge loss. Do we have a Q&A already from an honest attendee? Is Google Ads worth investing in? Do you want to answer that one, Paul, while I do this? So is Google Ads worth investing in for providing services?
Yeah, just a quick note on the questions there, just while Alex loads that up. we can always answer some of them at the very end. What we might do is just go through them, because there's plenty to kind of discuss. So many different products between like cloud services, search, video, everything else. So if you have any questions, we might just answer them at the end in the interest of time.
Okay, I think I've got it here now. Sorry, 1 second. You think we'd be whizzes at this, but if it's not a Google product, I am. I think it's just a matter of sharing the actual computer audio, so we should have it here. Now, 2 secs, I'm almost there.
Just jump back into present mode.
Can you click anything in there, Alex?
Yeah. Are you guys able to hear any audio there?
Nothing there now again, unfortunately. It could be.
We might have to leave that one now then, unfortunately.
Okay.
Sorry about that, guys. So yeah, it's just it's sometimes with Google products, unless any of you guys are better adept at it than us, then you might be able to give us some tips. Sure, we'll move on, and then as we said this to Frank before, but we're actually going to be sharing this presentation afterwards, so you'll be able to check it out yourself afterwards.
Yeah.
But so that's been on search, but I might pass over to Paul, and Paul's going to chat a bit about the whole product suite that Google has. So let me know when you want
I'll get you to do the slide show for me, Alex,
yeah.
If you can handle that. But what I'd say is that, so if you want to switch to the next slide, look, that's a really great video. I definitely do advise you reaching out to it. So what I wanted to discuss was like what the size of Google is and how it's become such a driving force around the world, you know, within definitely the top 5 companies worldwide. So what we currently have and how we've grown is that we have 8 properties with 1 billion to almost 2 billion users worldwide. So that's between, like, you know, Google Play Store, where you can get a lot of apps, Android phones, Gmail, Google Maps, YouTube, and then you have obviously Google Photos, Firefox, and Google Search itself. So like what we even look at with YouTube, for example, in the force it is, so there's about 2 billion logged in users every single month watching content on YouTube. So it's just about 25% of like the worldwide population. So you can imagine how many people are actually invested in it, and it's something that we work with on a daily basis, but you can see the reach that Google has itself across so many different properties. So if you want to go next slide, Alex. So if I want to talk about like how, let's say, how does Google actually work? Like how do the products all benefit each other and they all tie into, like, let's say, the user journey. So what I'll get you to do is just imagine, so for example, your refrigerator stops working. So we'll start at the left-hand side, the very beginning of your journey. The refrigerator stops working. You need to get results very quickly. So what you do is that you look for tutorials on fixing a fridge. Next thing you do is that when you find a good tutorial, you start reading the article about what you need to do, what you need to buy, and how to fix it yourself. The next thing is that you make another search, let's say looking for how to buy those products from Amazon, how to buy them from different, like, let's say, Irish retailers, or where I can get the specific things that I need. The next thing you might do is actually use YouTube to kind of watch how you do those different things in terms of how do I remove a clogged coil, and how do I even fix a light switch or anything like that. So then I've watched that, and then I've pretty much exhausted all options, let's say, that I can do myself, because I'm certainly not a handyman. So it's something that once I've kind of exhausted all those options, what do I need to do next? I need to get professional help. So what I use is Google Maps to go look for a handyman that's close to me that I can use. And then what I do as my last step is that I send an email. And what we have then is a conversion, which is like, so what Google has done there is like from the very first instance of like people just looking to the very last person that getting that local handyman, what I've done is that I've helped them along the journey to kind of find exactly what they need, and I've helped the handyman gain that business in the meantime. So that's the kind of usual product journey that we take our customers through, and it's something that we use every single day. So if you want to go next slide, Alex. So what do we see? From online? How do we kind of leverage what we're seeing online to kind of help advertisers to kind of predict and kind of like help in any way we can? And this is especially important with what's been happening with COVID and everyone that's been operating online. So if you go next slide, we'll look at some of the things we use. So if we think back on this slide here, for example, and this is a tool you can use every single day. So this is Google Trends. So if you just search Google Trends, you'll get an idea of how to use it. But what we look at is how these trends kind of resulted in differences for business. So if I take this one here, for example, this graph is actually showing, you know, searches for delivery near me back in the kind of April period. So we saw this go up by 300% kind of from mid-March, which is huge. So if I'm any sort of a local restaurant, a local Deliveroo, this is going to be huge in terms of like how much money I'm spending, who I'm reaching out to. Similar trends can be seen for, you know, for hand sanitizer made at home, if I'm a hand sanitizer salesman or anything like that. So these are ones are kind of like, you know, this is how we go business specific. So if you go next slide, Alex. So this is one that's probably even more related to myself and Alex in terms of myself for cutting my own hair, and I'd say Alex is probably searching for the massage oil. But what I'll say is that if we do the two trends, basically, what we can see is that coming into kind of December 2019, massage oil kind of stays steady. That's fine. That's kind of like always ticking along, but cut your own hair. If I'm any kind of an Irish brand that sells any hair cutting like razors or anything like that, I can see that, you know, right after December, there's a huge spike in people looking. So then I need to start saying, okay, well, how am I looking? What do I need to put into Google? What keys or what signals do I need to adapt to? So it's all very interesting in terms of how specific you can get. And if you go next slide, Alex. So one thing that's kind of like really prominent at the moment is around mental health and lockdown. And what we saw over the last 30 days is like, you know, from kind of at the start of October, a huge spike here in the blue line of like people who are interested in the mental health topic. And like, you know, coming into November, coming into, let's say, Movember, and how important it is to have your mental health and stay on top of it at home, you can always get a view of like Google Trends and how it's working. So if I look at that and I go to the next slide, what I can see then is like what's kind of related. So, you know, staying on top is certainly for men's health and men's shed. It's kind of suicide as a topic, which is kind of breaking out. World Mental Health Day, mental health quotes. All of these are like really, really interesting and something we can leverage to see, you know, what's trending and how do we get the best help to people when we know people are searching for it. So all of these kind of combine into what we do on a daily basis and how Google, you know, leverages these to get to the right people. And then next one. Okay. And I'll hand over to Alex there. Yeah, that's you.
Nice. I'm just trying to get the Q&A up there. I'm not sure if I can be able to get it up when I'm presenting, but yeah, we can probably run through those at the end. Yeah, so thanks, Paul. So obviously there's a huge amount of data here. So what we're going to talk about is, you know, with Google search, people searching in the Google on Google website or on their phone. There's a huge amount of it, and obviously, as you can see with examples that Paul gave there, this is really useful information, not just for businesses, but for governments and for charities like Men's Sheds. If we can actually see what people are interested in, where they're interested in it, and when, it really informs kind of actions that we can take with our actual business. And so a lot of what Paul and I would do is trying to find, okay, where we can try and marry those with our interests for our clients. So see, okay, where is the interest, and when is a good time to be acting on certain interests, and how can we do that with our clients. But there's a couple of elements that are also really important for Google that make it so valuable. So everyone understands that, you know, that is quite an interesting, quite a valuable tool. But there's a couple other reasons why Google's so valued as a kind of advertiser, compared with, let's say, some of the other big names that would be really, really popular for advertising as well, like Facebook, or also kind of traditional advertising, like on the TV, for example. And the reasons why are kind of these three reasons: scale, intent, and real time. And I'll go through each of these of why these things are so valuable. And the first thing is scale. So you think about it, we probably all use Google, I would imagine. I know that obviously Paul and I use it so much, everyone does on their phone or on their computer, but almost everyone in the world does. So it's the world's biggest search engine. So there's actually 100 billion searches performed monthly around the world, which is absolutely bananas. So there's no scale like that with any other platform, online or offline. And there's so much data, and 15 to 20% of those are totally new. So this has completely changed the game in terms of kind of market research and knowing what people are looking for. So because if we think, for example, let's say this is back in the days of Mad Men, I mean, in the 60s, and you're trying to market a product, and the only way you would find out if someone would be interested in a product or what the interests of the public would be with focus groups. So you would bring in, let's say, 20 people at a time, and you might ask them, what is your opinion of this particular car brand, or do you like perfume? And you'd be tallying all the answers manually. And then afterwards you say, okay, well, we asked 200 people these questions, 20 of them liked it. So that's quite a high number, or is that quite a low number? Now, Paul and I, if we've got a client, let's say that a perfume client, and we want to know who's interested in a product, we can just go look at Ireland and say, okay, how many people searched for perfume in the last 6 months? And we can see that there's 50,000 searches, and that was 50,000 more or 20,000 more than the month before. This is data that we have instantly, and it's amazingly powerful. It'll show us that straight away we can see how many people are interested in something, and as I said, where they're interested in, and when it was. So the scale is huge. And then the next one is intent. So this is a quote that I quite like. It's from this guy, Seth Stevens Davidowitz. I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly. But he says, I call it Google search's digital truth serum, because people tell Google things that they might not tell their friends, family members, doctors, or market researchers. Because there's a trust element there. So I don't want to share my own Google search history over the years, but you would certainly search in anything, be it to do with your personal life, professional, and anything you want information on. And in that way, it really shows your intent. So unlike with a market researcher, I know if Paul and I were asked a few questions about, our exercise habits, I'd probably be lying to try to keep up with Paul. If they're asking about our beauty habits, Paul would probably be lying to keep up with me. But in terms of what you search into Google, you're always pretty honest. So there's real intent there. It's valuable stuff that people actually are interested in, and people do want to find out. And people really do tell Google everything. So this is an example that I really like. So these are kind of suggestions of what people actually do search on Google. So if you search I am 20 and, or if you search anything on Google, it'll populate the automatic, like most popular searches. So people are searching I'm 20 and never been kissed, I'm 20 and have no friends, I'm 20 and single, I'm 20 and still have acne. Now Paul's 27 and all those are true, but they probably would, he might be putting those in at some point. But it's the same for every age, no matter who you are, no matter what you're searching. People put in things that they really want information about. So it's hugely important that it's hugely valuable, and it's also hugely important that it's a trusted advisor, because this is really some of the stuff, like for example, stuff that we would do with Frank on Men's Sheds would be, how can we get the charity as prevalent as possible? How can we get the Men's Shed, the idea of it, out to as many people as possible? And this would kind of be some of the stuff that we look at. What are people searching, and can we get Men's Sheds there to be present? And then the last thing, sorry, I'm going on a bit, is real time. So all of these searches are in real time. So if you take the example of the market researcher earlier, of the kind of focus groups, all of that would have to be tallied. So we write down all the answers, and we tally it all, then we get given a report a few weeks later, we'll be able to analyze it. Google search is one of the largest real-time consumer data sets. That means that the minute someone searches, it's anonymized, and then it's shown, or then it's shared. So all of this is aggregated, it's all anonymized. We don't know what anyone is searching individually, but we do know that over a certain time frame, maybe 30,000 people search for this, or 50,000 search for that, and we know that instantly. So those are the three reasons why it's so valuable. I thought I'd just include this briefly before we go on to the next section. So I don't know if we have kind of feedback, or if anyone's able to speak to this. So, but Frank, maybe you're able to guess. So the blue line here is the search over the last, over a kind of year or a few months. The blue line is the search for vodka in Ireland. So do you have any guess of what that red line, that graph might be? So the blue is, you can see it's spiking. That's usually on Fridays. So blue line is spiking search for vodkas. Do you have an idea what the red line might be?
Is it headache tablets or paracetamol?
You're exactly right. It's hangover. So we can. This is a kind of an example of the exact kind of stuff that we would do. Paul and I would be trying to find this and saying, okay, vodka correlates hangover. I mean, I'd probably be able to tell you that for my teenage years. But so this is the example of kind of the power we're able to have now. And lastly, Paul mentioned this before. This is all stuff you can find yourself. So if you just go to trends.google.com, again, we'll be sharing these slides afterwards, and you can actually go for any search term in any location and look at the trends yourself. So coronavirus is a really interesting one, and things like hand sanitizer, like Paul mentioned. This is what we would use. This is a free public tool, and we use it every day for our jobs, trying to see, okay, when did people start searching for this, and what was searched for a lot that just kind of dropped off. So trends.google.com, you're able to look up all of these yourself. And so I can pass over to Paul. He'll talk a bit more on the COVID side of things.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Alex. Yeah, so what I'd say, even more related, because let's say what COVID brought on certainly was how many people were actually online. So not only that, you know, a lot of people would have had like stores, like physical stores that now, due to restrictions, have to close. So how do they adapt? How do they switch their business to go, well, I can still get online, I can still sell a lot of my products or a lot of my services to people who are looking online and get it out to them. So what we saw was that how the world is kind of changing, and like key trends, basically what happened during COVID. So if you just go on to the next slide, what we kind of outlined here is, yeah, so what happened with like online shopping. The second one is virtual communities, and the third one is kind of new media. So what all of those look like and the impact that COVID has actually had on each of those. So if you go to the next slide, Alex. So if I look at online shopping, for example, so I think each and every one of us, as we come into kind of the let's say the Christmas period, or how we're actually looking to buy online, if none of these retail stores, if they're selling non-essential items, but I think that's a story for another day. But essentially what we're looking at here is that how people are searching online and how people are actually running their businesses online. So daily searches, if you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, for online delivery has gone absolutely skyrocketed over the last few months. So everyone's doing online delivery. So it's something that, you know, all businesses need to adapt to. So it's something that Alex and myself will work with on a daily basis. And then if I go back to kind of like how we use those trends to say, okay, out of those online businesses, who's doing well? So I think all of you would have heard about how COVID's going to bring on this baby boom. My brother's actually having a baby in February, so he's proof that it's all true and everything Google says is true. But essentially what you see here is that 38% increase in baby searches year on year. So what you're seeing is that there's a lot more search for babies. So if I'm a retailer and I'm selling kind of baby products, let's say, I better get to those people. I better, you know, get more things online, get to more people and expand exactly who I'm looking for. And I use Google to do that. And then the next one, if you go to the next slide, Alex, is looking at this virtual community. So similar to how myself and Frank and Alex are working, like right now, we're actually a virtual community on Men's Sheds, for example. So when we're talking about how we can meet up and how we can stay kind of together and stay impacted for the whole of COVID and the whole of these kind of lockdowns, is having those virtual meetups that, you know, looking for virtual events and moving everything online. So Men's Sheds, the Sheds live stream that we're currently doing, that's part and parcel of like how everything is moving online for the time being. I bet a lot of us can't wait to get back outside just to talk to anyone. But in terms of like what we do online, that's what's happening. And then how that affects like e-commerce and economies globally is that people are now adapting to doing like virtual showrooms when you're looking for cars for Christmas and doing shop streaming. So walking around their shop with a video or a live stream to see, do you want this product? I can send it to you then. So it's all very interesting about how people are adapting and what they're doing online. And then if we go to the next slide, is that some of the new habits, and just kind of like how exactly myself and Alex would use it is that, you know, we everyone's working from home, but like if we take babies, for example, and what they're actually selling online, we're looking for baby clothing, high chairs and boosters. So we can go like individual product and see which ones that we sell. So like if I'm a retailer, I can see a lot more people are looking for baby clothing. I have lots of it. I better push this online instead of looking for like, you know, strollers and accessories. That's actually gone down. So it's just interesting to see how we leverage everything. And then if you go to the next slide, then is that new media. So what I think is huge, and it's actually a suggestion I was saying to Frank, or going to say to Frank at least, was the consumer shifts in terms of what people are looking online. So if you see from March 2020, there's a lot more people looking at the news on UK for any update that they can get. I definitely have never watched the news so much in my life, but it's something that we've adapted with new trends. So workouts from home is another thing for mental health and just staying physically active. And then perfect banana bread. So if I was to challenge, you know, Men's Shed as a community, what do we want to do for November? How do we adapt to new media? How do we create a community? You know, launching a Movember campaign that all of you grow a mustache for mental health over November is about, okay, I'm using online to kind of participate in these things. I've created now another community. And, you know, for example, if I'm Gillette, at the end of November, everyone's going to need to shave off their mustache. I'm Gillette, I'm going to reach out to all those people who are doing it. So it's very interesting the way it works, that everything kind of comes full circle and we can all benefit each other there. So if you go to the next slide, Alex.
Totally. Oh,
yeah.
Nice.
So I let Alex kick back in.
Yeah, I wonder if here we might, because we blasted through a lot of stuff that's quite interesting. I think maybe if we take a pause for a couple of questions halfway through, and then we'll take questions at the end. Would that work for you, Frank?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we've had a few questions in. One is a question around, and you talk about it, online communities. And Joe Kane asks, since the lockdown, Irish men's groups, we have moved to video conferencing. And dare I mention another brand, but Zoom has sort of captures the imagination. But in saying that, how does Google Meet compare with Zoom? How would you encourage people to switch over to Google Meet? Because I think it's a fact, and you should know that probably from the work we see, and what we see in the associations, is probably 40 to 50% of sheds are using a Gmail address. Now, sometimes that will be individuals, but moreover, it'll be the shed itself. So shed name at Gmail. Does that lend itself to make it easier to hook up on Google Meet?
Yeah, do you want to take this one, Paul?
Yeah, I'm happy to take this one. So what I'd say is that, look, it's great to hear that you're using the Gmail side of things. And I think this comes into like the online safety that we'll pick. So if I'm using Gmail, for example, like Zoom doesn't have, let's say, its own email address. Zoom doesn't have, like, it's a website platform. So the difference is one works well, like myself and Alex have both used Zooms for quizzes, everything else. And there's a preference there. Why I would couple like a Gmail address with, let's say, Google Hangouts is because, as we get more information and we need to protect more users, Gmail becomes really important because it can kind of like, filter out some of that spam email. It kind of filters out, has more security protocols. So if I attach that to using like a Hangouts, like a video meet, and I'm already using like, a secured Gmail address linked to it, I've just become like an extra bit more secure online. So I'm using kind of like with like, I'm not kind of like combining different platforms. So that's how they work quite well in terms of how Google Hangouts Meet works, is that what we're trying to do is that, the simplicity of use, that I can just click in straight away my Gmail and get it all set up, and they're directly linked to each other. So that's why it's kind of like important to use both of them together. But it's all about the information that comes back from it as well.
Great, that answers that. Another question from Liam Stapleton in Kildare. He asks, and you went some way to answering this, Alex. In fact, you went a long way to answering it. But is Google a good way to advertise your business? And moreover, to the a global behemoth, if I can use that expression, but the local ability of Google to drive sales and interest, be it recruiting men to a shed or be it actually genuinely doing a business locally. I think that's an advantage, is it?
Yeah, definitely. And I think even before investing, that there's a lot you can do with Google. So stuff that Paul and I would have worked on before as well is actually what we call Google My Business. So actually, before you even invest we work with Google Ads, myself and Paul, and that's people advertising on the Google search results page or with ads around on different websites. But before you even get to that, there's a lot of free ways you can advertise. And one of the simplest ones is what's called a Google My Business page. And when we finish the presentation and send on this email to Frank, maybe we'll send an element on this to you as well, Frank, if you can share it to the guys. And that's simply just getting your website or getting your business on the Google search results page. So if someone searches it, there's a really simple little tab that has all the contact information. That's totally free, and that's something that you can set up in a couple of minutes, and it really makes such a big difference to advertise online. Then when you get to actually promoting things locally, Google is still a really good fit, and you can kind of get by with whatever budget. Some people invest €5 a day on campaigns, then other people would invest hundreds and hundreds. But because it's so targeted, you can really make it work for you in whichever way you want. So let's say, for example, you have a business that's really local to one county or even to one local area. You can just target people in that area and say if someone searches for handyman, you can serve your ad to people that search for handyman just in that area. So you're not serving ads to people in a different part of Ireland that you're not servicing. So yeah, it's a really good service. But before you even start investing, there's a lot you can do without paying for anything. So I definitely recommend it. I mean, we are biased, but it is a really good one.
Well, I think that's very important, and given, you know, the current climate pandemic, you know, buying local and shopping local is very much on everyone's agenda this Christmas, be it Chris Kindle's or be it just your normal family shopping. And on the other side of that equation, be it the sheds who are producing, you know, ideal Christmas gifts and many amounts of arrays of tabletop displays to, you know, mini reindeers I've seen made in some sheds up the north, and they're great. So I think it's important, but it's good that there's a free step, you're saying, before you actually commit, which I think is and learning that can be done, which is great.
Exactly. Yeah. There's loads up there. I can see that there's actually a fair few questions in the chat, but I think some of them related to the content and some others. So what we might do is we'll go on to the online safety bit, and then
I'll have a read through those, and I'll come back with those. Yeah, you can continue with online safety.
Great stuff. I think this is me, Paul, is it? And then
that just you starting off.
Sweet. So this is pivoting slightly. I feel I was halfway through that when I was listening to us talk. I feel it's almost as if we're here selling Google, which isn't the case at all. This is what made me kind of just be a kind of an insight into the kind of the work that we're doing. But one thing that we heard from Paul that is topical, and it's really, really topical now, is kind of online safety. And so we have this element of the presentation as well, just with some kind of stuff that we would notice and stuff that we're briefed on that might be useful for you guys to learn about as well. So just, sorry, I'll zip to the next slide. So some common threats with online safety. So I know for myself, from experience, it's probably the same for all of you, that back when maybe the internet wasn't so fast and we didn't all have it in our pockets, it could be pretty obvious to note when something was a bit fishy, for want of a better word. So I always remember my dad was don't open any on any kind of pop-up ads, and that was kind of all you needed to know. But now it's gotten a bit more sophisticated, so people kind of want to know, you know, what are the actual threats that are out there. So we're going to run through a couple of them. So the first would be phishing with a PH. So this might be one that you've heard of before, and this is really common. So it's when someone masquerades as either a business or a person. So phishing's actually been going on for a long time, but most commonly it would have been done before the internet with banks. So you might have someone that calls you up and says, "Oh, I'm calling from Bank of Ireland, and we just need to review your account. Can you give us your bank number and your PIN code?" And so most of us would know now not to give that information out over the phone. Some people still do, so it's really important to be aware of. But where it's not as known about is actually online. So this happens just the same, but with emails. So people often send direct social messages and emails pretending to be either PayPal, like in this example, or a bank or an official entity, and requesting information. And so because this is maybe a slightly newer way of doing phishing, some people aren't as aware of it. So it's really important to be aware that whatever the email you receive, to absolutely make sure that it is from the institution that you have business with, and not someone masquerading as the institution or as the bank. So we'll give a couple of examples of how you'd be able to notice that. Spam is a different one. So phishing purports to be someone from an official institution. Spam is kind of just like you would get a spam advertising or spam newsletter through your door. It's not as targeted. It would be kind of irrelevant postings on a community group or a spam email that's sent at length. And you can actually get spam from reputable sources, like from businesses. And it's not really let's say dangerous for the most part. It would just be kind of unwanted emails that you didn't sign up for. So something to be aware of as well, but rarely requesting information from you. And then lastly, or second lastly, a computer virus. So this is probably the most serious of them all, and probably the least common as well for ourselves, but it's a piece of code. So a piece of kind of invisible technology that's capable of, when it gets into your computer, copying everything in the computer or having a detrimental effect of destroying some data. So they would probably be a hacker is someone that, of course, that purports any of those three, so that actually implements any of these things. So they're the most common ones, and probably the ones that we would come across the most ourselves, myself and Paul. Thankfully, very rarely. And one of the great things about Google products, like a lot of you would have Gmail, like Frank mentioned, there's a huge amount of built-in defenses against any of that stuff. Like, obviously your spam folder is one, but like even something like the if we take the example of phishing. So a huge amount of phishing emails actually would never even get to your inbox because they would automatically be filtered by Google. So you wouldn't even see them in promotions or spam. They would be taken before they even get there, and it would be an internal Google server that sees this and says that's fishy phishing, and they would block it. So the fact that you're using Google products is a good start. But I might pass over to Paul, and he can kind of give some telltale examples of when that might slip through.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great point there on the kind of Gmail side of things, that the more we can get like out of the way, so it's not coming into our inbox and not getting to anyone, and less phone numbers and everything going out, the better we'll be. And I think what's important here, this isn't only Gmail, like this can come into your phone, into your WhatsApp messages. So it's just important to look out for. So hopefully you know the signals. So if you go to the right here, the next slide. Yeah, so just tips on browsing the web safely, and again we'll follow up with this deck, so you do have these. Always look out for the lock screen, the padlock, and the HTTPS. So again, that's a reputable source. If it's not a padlock, it might come up as another symbol, but it just means that, look, it's secured, it's safe, and it's one that's kind of like a verified website that you can go online. But if you keep getting, these notifications to click on, always look out for this in the top left-hand corner. If this seems kind of fishy, just X out of the website, and do another search and look for, it's about browsing as well. So if you go to the next slide. Secure your device. Again, this mightn't be relevant to everyone who doesn't have a smartphone, but even if you have any sort of phone or laptop or a Kindle, just the common things is just leaving it unattended. If you're in a public place, if you're in a restaurant, and you're not having a passcode, the importance of this is that it only takes kind of like a few minutes to actually get into it. So you just have to be responsible with your devices. I can't tell you how many phones I've lost over the years. My mother would kill me, but it's just about, if that ever happens, you know how to shut it down. You do your Google search about shut down my device and follow the steps. They'll have really reputable resources for that, but it's important to say, like, look, if this does happen and we can't find it, let's remove all trouble from ourselves, basically. The next one then, Alex, is some of the tips that we'd use on a daily basis. So setting a password or a passcode on your device is standard. Don't tell people your password unless you are really bad at remembering things, in terms of like, tell someone you trust and always have your password that way. Use a PIN that's either your birthday or maybe your favorite child's birthday or anything like that. Remember, not all laptops lock automatically, so that's something to remember. And don't leave your device unattended. So pretty general, but definitely something to kind of refresh your memory on it. And then the next one, so public Wi-Fi. Again, some of the huge ones here is that when I'm going abroad, let's say, for example, and I'm kind of like just looking for any bit of Wi-Fi because I don't want to use my data roaming, how secure am I online? So first tip, I think Alex would echo this, is always try and use like a private Wi-Fi, whether that's a restaurant, whether it's a bar. When I use that public Wi-Fi, there's all these different tips that people can get more access because it's public. So one thing key here is like, if I'm doing kind of a Google search on maybe maps to find out directions, or I'm getting best recommendations, that's all fine. But if I'm doing kind of like, I'm topping up my bank emails, I'm exchanging money online, or I'm doing anything that might be a bit private, I definitely don't want to do that on a public Wi-Fi. I want to get to the private Wi-Fi, or maybe my house Wi-Fi or hostel Wi-Fi, and downloading and installing software is definitely a no-no on public Wi-Fi, because we just want to be as secure as possible. So these are some of the handy tips that we use, just in general on travel, or anytime we kind of leave the country. So just on the next slide, and then staying safe online in the long term. So I think there's one more on this. Mindset of caution, password safe, spotting and avoiding counterfeit goods, and that's the phishing emails, the Gmail emails, and not telling anyone who calls you randomly any information until you know it's a reputable source. I think all of us are kind of aware of it, but if there's someone who's a cold caller, you can quiz them back, you can find out a bit more, and then you can do your Google search about, what company did I mention, what were they talking about on the phone. You can put that into Google search and you'll find a result of something that's happened to someone else. And straight away, for the next time that let's not share this. You can share with the Men's Shed community of, this is going around at the moment, watch out for this. So it's all about kind of learning and kind of adapting to safe information.
Yeah, I think on this one as well, like it's a good one. Like all of this seems super super basic, and it's stuff we would do automatically when either using our phone, like for phone calls, or out on holidays, you know, minding your passport. But sometimes people forget to do it for online. So it's really simple stuff. But just think about, you know, if this was a phone call that you got, or if this was someone who came up to you on the street on holidays, would you trust this person? Would you trust this email? Or would you kind of take a second look? So some simple stuff like that, just having a rule of thumb of have a mindset of caution, and you should be fine. And then password, sorry, Paul.
Yeah, so if I go to kind of strong passwords, again, what we have, they're hard to remember. This is writing down, but again, the more complex, the better secure you are in terms of how it's done. So it's always what we recommend is kind of like changing your password. If you have a combination, I know I have a combination. If I struggle to remember passwords, that I have it all in one secure place that only I know it is. But like changing and updating your password, not too regularly, but enough that like you're saying, okay, well, start of a new month, I've had a lot of spam emails, I've had a lot of this, let's change it up just to, like, you know, get a fresh look on things, make sure that everything's ticking over and you're kind of like protecting your online security.
Yeah, and I think so. Finally, just on that, guys, or do you want to take this, Paul?
Yeah, so just as a final point, because I wasn't sure which slides were in there, was look, be sharp, be alert, be secure. Again, very, very general, but it's something to look out for. And like, you know, even from here, you'll be able to recognize scams and recognize those emails a lot clearer just from us going through them now today.
Yeah, totally. Cool, guys. I think that's about it. So apologies, we absolutely blasted through a lot of content there. We just had so much to cover, and not had that much time to do it. So apologies if that was really swift and kind of hard to follow at times. We will be sharing this deck with all of you, and literally this afternoon. Frank already has a copy of it, so you'll be able to read all the content on it yourself. But now that we have a bit of time, maybe we can take some of the questions. I know there's a lot. Either maybe we can start with kind of ones more about the presentation, and then we can kind of move on to other ones as well. So I don't know if there was any questions during the presentation that we might have missed, Frank, or
no, I'm just going to go through that now. I think is our Google ads worth investing for providing services? I think we covered that off very well. A question about a Dropbox subscription tied to one laptop. I think that's not, to be fair, that's not your product.
Yeah, what I'd say, just as a note on that, and I know it's like, you know, it's a very fair question about how you get the information online, and certainly myself and Alex work in the tech industry, so we should know, but I definitely don't think I know. But again, that comes back to, look, if you have that kind of a question that you're asking us online that you're thinking about, type it into Google search, and, you know, see what kind of comes up in the first few, like use some of the tips that you've seen here, or even look it up on YouTube, for example, and then you'll see, like, you know, all the cases of, okay, how the size of the like Google Photos limit. You can see at like the data centers, for example, because I know that was another question. You can see the size of the data centers, and you can see the tips on the Dropbox linking of like who's done it before, how they've done it. So it's really key in terms of like finding out the solution, basically.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And just back to the online safety piece, I think it's safe to say, you know, the old adage always stands. If it sounds too good to be true, it generally is. And no matter how ministers of finance from foreign clans claim to want to share 10 million euros with you, it generally doesn't work out that way. To the phishing. Jack in Cork had a question, and it's relevant more on the online safety aspect, but in a more general theme, you know, the whole area of fake news and all this sort of information, you know, cheating and lying and sort of targeting. Is there one particular site area that you go to filter news? Is there something you'd recommend? I mean, I think I'm taking the overall theme is, you know, and I think, you know, it's hard for people, but you have to understand that the more you give to an online company like Google, the more you get back in. If you coordinate your Gmail with your Google Hangouts, you get more safety in that sense. But is there something, sorry, just back to that, is there something on the news, filtering news, checking news, that sort of thing that you'd recommend?
Yeah, It's a good question. You know, it's so topical now, more so than it's ever been, and even recently because of COVID as well. That there's been a kind of lot of misinformation. So, kind of fake news has always been a hot topic, but I think in the tech world, especially over the last year or so. The short answer is that there's a couple of tools, but they would kind of be third-party ones, not ones we'd know ourselves. But what I can do is that there's a really good video for using for spotting fake news, because to be honest, aside from having your own news source, so one that you trust, so whether it's RT or Irish Times or one of the papers in the UK, that's the best way of knowing whether something is correct, is making sure it's a reputable source and reading just from them or just from a few select versions of them. But with social media especially, and browsing online, there are a huge amount of news sources that you'll come across, even if you only want to be reading, let's say, the BBC. When you're browsing online, you will find other ones, and a lot of them are really good, but then there's some that aren't. So it's really just about knowing yourself how to spot whether something is fake news or not. And so even I would have issues sometimes. I'd see a clickbait article on Facebook, you know, and I click on it, like, that can't be right, and then I read it, and something like halfway through I realize, oh, this probably isn't accurate. It's hard to do, but what I'll do is we'll share that video afterwards, and I'll give you some good tips on how to kind of note if something's fake news or not. But really, to cut a long answer short, the only real way is just picking ones you trust and just reading from them, and then the defense is knowing how to spot fake news just yourself. So I'll share that afterwards, or we will in email and send it on. I saw one there from Frank. I think that there's quite a few. I might just blast through a couple of quick ones, because I can see. I didn't have the Q&A open there, but I have it with the. There's one from Liam about the limit to Google Photos. I think this is a similar question to one you sent us by email, Frank, about kind of storage. So I know there was a question before about. Something about a hard drive and whether they could get whether there could be storage be able to.
Sorry, that was Joe McDonough. Yeah, he is having trouble with the portable hard drive and and to the amount of photos stored. So maybe you might be able to talk about cloud storage and the safety aspects behind.
Exactly. Yeah, Paul kind of mentioned here. So again, we wouldn't be experts on hardware or even software when it's not Google's. But the question is, there a limit to the amount of photos Google Photos will store? Actually, the answer is no, because it uses cloud storage. So there is a limit to the amount of photos your phone can store, because a phone uses a hard drive, the memory on a phone. So if you're using Google Photos or any photo application on your phone and saving them there will be a limit. So it depends on the phone, but there will be limits how many you can store. But a lot of Google phones, in fact, all of them now would come with the Google Photos app built in, which uses cloud storage for the most part. And so that actually doesn't save your photos on your device, but it saves it in what's called a cloud, or that's like an online folder elsewhere. So it's just like a photo you have on your computer, but it's saved online, and now only you can access it. It's the exact same as any folder. It's like having a folder on your desk at home, except it's totally virtual. It's in what we call the cloud, and that has unlimited space. So all the stuff that Paul and I would do now with our work, but also personally now, I would save everything into the cloud. So I have what's called a Google Drive. We could share information on this as well. And all my documents, all my photos, all my videos, everything I have is saved on my personal drive, which is in the cloud, where there's no minimum storage, there's no maximum storage, and only I can access it. So we'll share some stuff on that as well. I'd really recommend you guys take a look at saving stuff on a platform like that, because God knows I've been in an issue. I've had the issue before, like when I was in college, saving essays and then saving them to a hard drive, losing the hard drive. And now they weren't very good anyway, but now thankfully when I save things, I save them all online, so I don't have that issue.
And just to that point, am I correct in saying that if you do register for a free Gmail account, you get up to 50 gigabytes storage with part of a Gmail?
Yeah, I think it's 50 megabytes, whichever one is
50
bigger.
Megabytes.
Yeah.
I think it's gigabytes. Yeah.
Because, gigabytes. Yeah.
Because I've seen people, and I'm a guilty clutter. You can scan an awful lot of information, bills, letters, all that sort of stuff, and you can actually email it to yourself and then throw out the hard copy. Exactly. Because I think a lot of the issues with the cloud is actually just a question of trust, because I grew up with a filing cabinet in the corner and every telecom errand bill went into it, and that's the fact. Mm-hmm. But nowadays there's a different way of doing that, and I think it's about changing behaviors as much, but it's about trust to allow us to change behavior. So exactly. I think that's a valid point. Community building. A quick question on how would you recommend Sheds share video clips, DIY video clips. What we have, especially in lockdown, is you have a lot of centers of skills where one shed will have particularly good at a certain type of wood turning, or they'll have a certain skill. How would you recommend just being able to sort of capture that and share it across? Is it video? Is it online meetings? What would you recommend?
Do you want to take that one, Paul?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a number of ways, and it's a great way of actually sharing. So if I can go back to like Alex's point on the Google Drive, for example. So if I set up like a men's sheds Google Drive, so it's just, basically that online folder that everyone has access to. What I can do is that if there's a group that are, recording that video and they're looking for like how to share it just with the men's sheds at the time, I can put it, like upload it, similar as just sending an email into that Google Drive, and then everyone in that med shed who has access to that can then look at that video and kind of learn from each other. So then Frank yourself can send out an email being like, oh, we've just received this. You can hop into this Google Drive link, and then everyone can access it. In terms of like how we share it on, like, let's say like a larger scale, coming back to that social media point, it is also huge. That we're still sharing on social media because it's still not about one, it's about a few of them. And then finally, like the last thing would be kind of like, creating that YouTube channel that Men's Sheds already has. So if you get a video, Frank, for example, that you want to share with the rest of the like community, let's say you're putting it up there now, we get into an element of like, what do you want to keep private away from the whole public, and what do you want to keep just between Men's Sheds? What you can do is like upload it onto YouTube, and then you can make it like a private video link. Now, in my opinion, just in terms of like ease of use, maybe having that Google Drive just for Men's Sheds might be the best way to do it, because I can just click a link and then I can see all the videos that went in there. I can have an October folder, I can have a November folder of those videos of like, it's woodwork video or anything else that might be of interest. And then I have that access. So that's probably my best recommendation, and something that I do on a daily basis. But then again, it just depends on what you want to do. Do you want to make it public, which you can do? You can download and put it up on Facebook if you want. But it just depends. You have them all there to start off with, and then you can grow from there.
Excellent. So you're saying, and am I correct in saying Google Drive is free or no?
Yep.
The Google Drive.
Google Drive is free.
Google Drive. So each shed can have their own Google Drive, and then allow internal access, and then maybe a broader access at another level. That's definitely
absolutely that's all there. So like they can have each one depending on county, let's say, and then we can have an overall one which could be like, the feature of like the main videos that are coming in, and you can update this as much or as regularly as you want, as many videos as you can kind of go in on a free storage side of things, and just kind of keep improving from there, basically, of like how you're getting all the information to everyone. Because look, again, everyone's doing things online. For example, like if I was to do like a Movember with my team inside here in Google, what I would do is kind of create a Google Drive of like everyone's like progress pictures of their mustaches. Now, I might never get one from Alex because I have no progress. But for example, I can get that progress report of all those images, and I can say, well, here they all are. I'm going to put up a social media post, or here they all are. I can send out an email to everyone to say, okay, look, I have them all in one place, and I can send them out. You can access them here.
Guys, it's been fantastic. It's been a very knowledgeable hour.
Because I just noticed one question from Ray Keeley, which I think is really important. If we have 2 minutes just to answer that, I might just briefly address it.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
It's a three-parter. I'll blast through. And the first one is why do we call IT systems digital? The correct title is binary. It could well be the case. To be honest, I'm not sure. So we wouldn't be the computer science grads, but that could be correct. It could be that binary is more accurate. But the second two, I think, are really, really relevant. So the first is how do Google protect consumers from fraud and theft, and gives the example of people that are putting up fake ads and then taking money. Oh, sorry, that's my phone going. It's a really good question, and it is a massive responsibility, I think. But to be honest, I think one of the best things about Google is that is the security element to it. in terms of Google search, it's extremely secure. So any ads that are placed, so anyone that's advertising on Google search, and there's a really stringent method used of verifying business, verifying products, and then also verifying payments. So anytime someone advertises, it's really it's made sure that as much as possible that it's not a scam, and that it's a secure connection. And then we spoke about with Gmail in terms of the phishing. There's a huge amount that goes into making sure that's secure. However, in the internet, there's always things that occur that unfortunately slip through the net, and that especially happens on websites themselves as opposed to on Google search, on the Google products. So the vast majority of phishing would take place actually on third-party websites. So not actually in your Gmail or in the Google search or on YouTube, but when you click onto another website, and that is when the actual phishing would take place, be it a scam ad, be it someone asking for information, that kind of stuff. So sometimes it will get through to your Gmail. Sometimes you might see something on a YouTube, but very rarely. But when you see something pop up and then you go onto the website, that's when the issue can be. So I'd be super careful with that. But the third, which I think is the most important question, and it's one that asks quite a lot, is where does Google actually receive its online data, and how does Google verify it, and how do they know? So this is a really interesting question, and definitely a really important one. So the vast majority of this information comes from searches. So we know, obviously, because Google own the search engine, they can see where all the searches come from. But they also know a lot about the users. So like in Ireland, for example, we could see all those people that were searching for delivery near me, which the example that Paul gave. But we also know of those people, for the most part, we would know a lot of them and kind of what demographic they fall into. So their age, their gender, and where they are. And a huge amount of that, the vast majority, comes from what we call first-party data. So that's data that Google actually has themselves based on their products. So for your Gmail, for example, for
people give Google.
The information gives Google, exactly, yeah. So like for my Gmail account, it knows my gender, my age, and where I am because of my Gmail, my YouTube, which I use a lot, and kind of your phone and that kind of stuff. And so it's all stuff that's opted in. And so it has all that information about a lot of people, but it's all aggregated. So there's no way it would ever be able to know, that Paul Googled this yesterday in this location, or that I was doing this, whatever. It would just know at an aggregate and an anonymized level. Okay, there's 30,000 people that fall into this category, that search this, etc.
Alex, apologies, I'm going to cut across you. We're on the hour mark, and I think
of course,
just with all your Google knowledge, with all your Google information, I want to score prediction for Saturday evening, Ireland v France, if you don't mind.
Paul's going to have to go first with all his rugby experience.
Okay, what I get, I'm not going to do a Google search for this, but I will say, and I might go against the grain, I'll say 32-28 to Ireland.
Good score. Yeah, okay. Alex?
I'm going to be similar. I'm going to say probably 28-25, but I don't think... Actually, no, I'm going to have to change that to 24-20 without a bonus point, try bonus points.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we'll lose to England on points difference.
Yeah, I can't thank you enough. It's been tremendously insightful. There's an awful lot of information that will flow from this, and we're going to share the slides, and we're going to share any questions maybe after the fact. I really appreciate your openness for sharing all this information with us, and we'll talk very soon, but thank you very much for this afternoon. Take care of yourself.
Thanks, Emil.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers, guys.
No problem.
Brilliant.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Pleasure.
Bye.
Thanks so much.
Bye.